Good morning. Thank God it's Friday. This is Inside Nigerian Leadership Television. My name is Winifred Ubebo. Today is October 3, 2025. Of course, on this program today, we just look at what the national papers are saying. Of course, we always want to start with Nigeria's foremost newspaper, Friday newspaper, and that is Leadership Friday. Leadership's leading story today is on North Central Commission's 140 billion naira 2025 take-off budget. Now, the National Assembly has passed commissions or development commissions for all the regions in the country. We have Northeast Development Commission, we have North Central now, we have Northwest, we have Southeast, we have Southwest, and of course, South-South Commission. And today's focus is on the North Central Commission's 140 billion naira 2025 take-off budget. Leadership says Senate's approval includes 10 billion naira for cars, travels 9 billion naira, phone calls 1.2 billion naira. That story continues on page 4 of Leadership Friday. Of course, we'll have to take some excerpts from that leading story. The 140 billion naira 2025 budget approved for the North Central Development Commission (NCDC), now 3 months from the end of the present fiscal year, has triggered public outrage after it was revealed that 20.2 billion naira was allocated for cars, travels, and phone calls. Another 2 billion naira plus was earmarked for refreshments and meals for committees. Analysts have criticized the excessive allocation of funds to non-essential items and questioned why such allocations should occur barely 3 months before the end of the fiscal year. The approval followed a budget defense during which the managing director of the NCDC, Mr. Shenyi Yisen, appeared before the committee chaired by Senator Titus Zam. After a careful review of the issues contained in the budget and the eloquent presentation by the MD and his team, the committee has approved the budget of 140 billion naira as presented by the commission, Senator Yam announced. According to Mr. Yisen, the budget was structured as follows: 100 billion naira for capital expenditure covering development projects across the 6 North Central states and the Federal Capital Territory (FCT), and 40 billion naira was earmarked for recurrent expenditure, including personnel salaries, logistics, overheads, and administrative costs. The budget details indicated the following controversial allocations within the 440 billion naira recurrent portion: 10 billion naira for the purchase of official vehicles, 9 billion for domestic and international travel, 1.2 billion naira for telephone and internet communication. Additional allocations include 5 billion naira for the purchase of furniture and fittings, 7 billion naira for health and medical equipment, 10 billion naira for security equipment, 5 billion naira for water facilities, 20 billion naira for agricultural infrastructure, 9 billion naira for the construction of skills acquisition centers, 3 billion naira for the rehabilitation of residential buildings, and 15 billion naira for public schools rehabilitation. These are excerpts from the leading story on today's Leadership Friday newspaper. Senate's approval includes 10 billion naira for cars, travels, 9 billion naira, phone calls, 1.2 billion naira out of the 140 billion naira budget for takeoff of the North Central Commission. From that main leading story, we move ahead to the other stories gracing the cover of Leadership. We have Zamfara bandits seize policemen's phones, abduct councillors, cleric, and that's taking place, or that took place in Zamfara State. The story is on page 7 of Leadership. Zamfara bandits seize policemen's phones, abduct councillors, cleric. Flood ravages 20 Niger local government areas, 250 lives lost. And we have the picture of the project minister, and that is the FCT minister, Barrister Nyesom Wike, on the flag off of the installation of integrated solar lighting in districts of Abuja and expressways under the Light Up Abuja program on Thursday. Criticism trace Access Bank CEO's £15 million London mansion purchase. That story is on page 7 of Leadership Friday. Criticism trace Access Bank CEO's £15 million London mansion purchase. 581,878 students get 107.6 billion naira education loan. 16% of our Oil output lost during 3-day strike coming from NNPCL. 16% of oil output lost during 3 days strike, NNPCL. We move towards the masthead of leadership. 2027 act facts on electoral reform proposal. INEC tells National Assembly. Of course, we have barely just about a year and few months, just 2 months to go before the 2027 elections take place, and INEC has proposed some amendments to the Electoral Act 2022, which is yet 2021 actually, which is yet to see the light of day in the National Assembly. INEC tells National Assembly act fast on electoral reform proposal. Atop the masthead of leadership, 2027 article rules out stepping down for any candidate. Of course, he's countering the story that was trending the media yesterday that he was ready to step down for any capable and young candidate. But however, he has refuted that article rules out stepping down for any candidate. That story is on page 27 of Leadership Friday. Lastly, on the cover, internal conflicts won't stop at National Convention, PDP. And that takes us to the page 3 of Leadership Friday, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on UNGA, Nigeria at UNGA 80. UNGA means United Nations General Assembly. United Nations General Assembly was constituted 80 years ago, and today's stand is on the anniversary. Nigeria at UNGA 80. At the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, President Bola Tinubu delivered a message that was as blunt as it was timely: reform or risk irrelevance. Speaking through Vice President Kashim Shettima, he articulated a vision of a multilateral order that reflects the realities of the 21st century rather than clinging to outdated structures and diplomatic platitudes. The UN has been content with words that do not match action for too long. As the president rightly observed, that credibility gap threatens to render the global body inconsequential in shaping the most pressing challenges of our time. President Tinubu's address was notable for its clarity and courage. At a forum where leaders often hide behind careful diplomatic phrasing, he chose to confront uncomfortable truths. The Middle East crisis remains unresolved after decades of debate in those same halls. And we move towards the stand, and that is towards the conclusion of that stand today in leadership. Advocacy for Africa's mineral wealth must be matched by domestic policies that ensure transparency, local benefication, and the protection of communities from exploitation. Nigeria must invest heavily in the digital sphere in education, infrastructure, and regulatory systems that prepare its youth to compete and innovate. The stakes could not be higher. As Tinubu warned, a United Nations that fails to reform will indeed lose relevance. Excerpts from today's stand in leadership, Nigeria at UNGA 80, United Nations General Assembly. And from there, we move to the back page where we have conversation with Azu. Today's conversation is on how to drink from a poisoned cup, Harold Smith and the Nigerian story. How to drink from a poisoned cup, Harold Smith and the Nigerian story. Today's conversation with Azu, we take a quote from that. The British handed over the reins of power to a significant number of notorious politicians who over the years will make a fine act of notoriety. Today's quote from today's conversation with Azu Esiekwenem. Before we leave the back page, let's visit Ghana Must Go. Began on the news, we have I'll give you wings to fly, Tinubu assures Nigerian youth. And guess what the reply is? I'm actually cracking with laughter here. Ghana Must Go replied, just give them food first before you give them the wings to fly. Well, it's on that light note we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Friday. For more, don't forget to log into the website of Leadership. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Daily Sun. Daily Sun is talking about the Electoral Act, and of course, it has to do with the European Union. It says 2027, EU urges extensive reforms. 2027, EU, that is European Union, urges extensive reforms. The leading story on Daily Sun newspaper this Friday, October 3, 2025. Recommends constitutional judicial reforms before polls. INEC chairman asks NAS to pass amendments to electoral legal framework. And that story is on page 6 of Daily Sun this Friday. Like Leadership, we also have the picture of the barrister, the project minister, Mr. Project, on the cover of Daily Sun. Government abduct 2 councillors, 1 imam in Zamfara community. Governor Pebolo, Works Minister bemoaned state of federal roads in Edo. FEMA flags of road safety maintenance initiative in Enugu. Abuja at 50, Wike rolls out citywide streetlight project to tackle crime in FCT. State of emergency, court dismisses suit against Tinubu. ADC ticket, I didn't promise to step down. That is coming from the former Vice President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, Abubakar Atiku. Is the same headline story on the page, on the cover of Leadership newspaper. We move towards the masthead of Daily Sun this Friday. Lassa fever, Nigeria records 166 deaths. NCDC says fatality above 2024 rate. Of course, let's see some excerpts from that second leading story on the cover of Daily Sun this Friday. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control and Prevention, NCDC, has said 160 people died from Lassa fever between January and September, with the case fatality rate now higher than 2024 year. This is contained in Epidemiological Week 37 covering September 8 to 14, cited on the NCDC website yesterday. The Public Health Agency said that 895 confirmed cases were recorded across 21 states and 106 local government areas. He said this represents a case fatality rate of 18.5% compared to 16.9% reported within the same period in 2024. The agency noted that while suspected and confirmed cases were fewer than those reported last year, more patients are dying because of late presentation and poor health-seeking behavior, often linked to the high cost of treatment. As from the leading story on today's Daily Sun newspaper, Lassa fever, Nigeria records 166 deaths. NCDC says fatality above 2024 rate. The story continues on page 6 of Daily Sun. And lastly, on the cover of Daily Sun, UK, Nigeria still far from gender parity. Envoy. Rep Speaker vows end to women's political underrepresentation. It's on that note we conclude review of front headline stories on Daily Sun newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Daily Sun, www.thesun.ng. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, still talking 2027, and that is EU on Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard says 2027 polls EU mission 6 constitutional judicial reforms, just like Daily Sun, the paper we reviewed before it. 2027 polls EU mission 6 constitutional judicial reforms. Delay of electoral reforms worries INEC chairman. Says uncertainty over legal framework could disrupt preparations. Kicker to that leading story on today's Vanguard. 2027 polls EU mission 6 constitutional judicial reforms. Delay of electoral reforms worries INEC chairman. Says uncertainty over legal framework could disrupt preparations. Lastly, on the cover of Vanguard newspaper this Friday, tinted glass permits outrage as police begin enforcement. This is despite the fact that the court to stop the process the court process is already in place. Tinted glass permits outrage as police begin enforcement. And that concludes review of front headline stories of Vanguard newspaper this Friday. For more, log into the website of Vanguard. We head up to the next paper on our lineup, and that is The Punch. The Punch says Southwest states tighten borders amid banditry surge in Kwara. Southwest states tighten borders amid banditry surge in Kwara. Southwest states at 6. We have Osun, Ondo, Ekiti, Lagos, Oyo, and Ogun states. Osun, Ondo deploy tactical teams, riot police in border communities. Southwest states fortified against attacks, Amotekun Corps. Intelligence agencies track bandits, plan containment, eliminate criminal elements. CDS charges security forces. Kickers to that leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Southwest states tighten borders amid banditry surge in Kwara. Still on The Punch, EU canvasses urgent reforms before 2027 polls. Still another leading story, same leading story on The Punch this Friday. Bandits abduct Kwara policeman, Samvara councillors, village heads. 15 more corpses recovered from Kogi boat accident. 3,265 Borno children treated for malnutrition. Beside the masthead of The Punch, Obi won't join dollarized primaries, obedience reply article. The story is on page 27 of the Punch. Obi won't join dollarized primaries, obedience reply article. On the above the masthead of the Punch newspaper, Rivers Funds ICPC reviews petition against IBAS. Electricity Act poor Nigerians orders to get tax relief. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on the Punch newspaper this Friday. For more, log in to the website of the Punch newspaper. We head up to the last paper we have on our lineup this Friday, and of course that is The Guardian. The Guardian has big story as its main story, and it says how brand Nigeria suffers for misdeeds of few abroad. How brand Nigeria suffers for misdeeds of few abroad is a big story that runs on pages 4 and 5 of the paper. Of course, they have illustration beneath that leading story. It's a cartoon, actually. It says, what is that smell? Which one of you spoiled the broth? It says, Yahoo boys are not the only ones spoiling the image of Nigeria. There is clear abuse of power from the three arms of government coming from ex-President Goodluck Jonathan. That is the quote, illustration, cartoon illustration of the big story on the cover of The Guardian this Friday. How brand Nigeria suffers for misdeeds of few abroad. It's a big story, like I said earlier. It runs on pages 4 and 5 of The Guardian. Nigeria 65, 2 days after independence, bitter divisions persist over nation's future. Nigeria 65, 2 days after independence, bitter divisions persist over nation's future. Atiku rules out quitting presidential race, laments PDP woes. EU hates electoral progress amid push for reforms. Sanusi Awosika seek 30% representation, level playing field for women. The National Association of Resident Doctors, NAD, to track 24-hour call duty limit through chief residence 91 centers. NAD to track 24-hour call duty limit through chief residence 91 centers. That story is on page 29 of The Guardian. Ex-Commissioner decries Kwara's insecurity as bandits abduct policeman. Ex-Commissioner decries Kwara's insecurity as bandits abduct policeman. That takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of The Guardian. CDS, failing family system, values worsening insecurity. And from the health minister, Nigeria's health system performing at 45% capacity. Tinted glass, NBA fumes as police impound judge's vehicle. And that concludes review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Friday. For more, log into the website of The Guardian, www.guardian.ng. Well, viewers, all too soon, we've come to the end of today's program, Inside Nigeria. We just had newspaper review on this show. Don't forget to log into the website of Leadership, www.leadership.ng, for more stories. My name is Winifred Ubebo. Don't also forget to join us on this station for news on the hour. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 08036886158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.